Hello guys and welcome to my first Crucible video, and in this video we're going to be doing a bug guide, and we are going to be talking about the basics of bug, the gameplay, PvE/PvP side, and then we're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses, and then finally we're going to talk about the skill tree and which skill tree I think is the best and which I feel like is skills that you should be prioritizing. If you are just here for the skill tree, I will leave a timestamp on screen now so you can skip ahead to the video and find out the information that you want. So let's get started. So Bugg's passive is he has a movement speed lock, so that if he moves forwards, backwards, left and right, he will still move the same base movement speed, which is 4.5 seconds at level 1. And so if he's going forwards and then backwards, he is going the same movement speed, whereas other characters, the forwards and backwards movement speed is different, and normally it's moving backwards is slower. His primary fire, which is his little blaster, which can be used to activate seeds or just deal damage, and if you take the higher pH mixture, it does a 25% bonus damage over time on basic attacks, which I don't really recommend. So his shift ability, which I will be using in a second, is basically his thrusters, where he will use his jet fuel to move around the map faster. And once he gets below the threshold as shown here, there's a little threshold on the bar below the crosshair, which when it's below that threshold, you can't activate your boosters again until it gets above that, which it takes, I think it's 2 seconds to get from 0 to above the threshold to activate your boosters again. So that's something you should be very mindful of when going into fights, or when you think you're about to fight. He has his dust cloud, which is toxic. It slows enemies and does damage over time, effects to the people that stand in it, or the PvE that stands in it. And then we have the shield burst, which does 400 base with a 25-second cooldown, and it has a very small radius. I think it's about 10 or 12 meters. So you have to be very aggressive to actually get value from it, or you have to be literally standing on top of the person to get value from it. It's basically like, I would say, half of Lucio's AoE in Overwatch. So it's something I feel like needs a little bit of tweaking, but yeah, we'll get to that later on. So now that we've talked about the basics of Bugg's skill set, let's talk about how you should play him in PvE/PvP. So as you know, Bugg is a very short to mid-range DPS/support character. I don't think it's fair labeling him as just a support, because he could be played in many different ways, and it depends on what skill set you take. But in my opinion, he is like a, say, 20% support, and then the rest is DPS. Like, he is pretty strong, in my opinion, for DPS department, especially if his plants are uncontested. But again, against other players, maybe it would be a little bit different. But the players that I was coming up against, the seed/plants were doing a lot of damage. So pre-fights, you want to be looking to farm PvE as fast as possible. Bugg is super efficient at doing that because of his toxic cloud and his plants, especially when you hit level 4 to level 5, and if you take the daisy chain skill. Basically what happens is Adrakal was going to swarms, and he was taking around a minute to minute 15 to clear a whole swarm because he doesn't have a decent AoE. Whereas Bugg, you can shoot them a few times to group them up, place the turret down, and then fly over them with a toxic cloud, and you can completely clear a whole swarm within about 10 seconds, again depending on grouping and how well you spread your toxic cloud. So he is very strong at PvE, and also pretty decent at PvP, depending on his positioning. So high ground is your best friend, keeping a medium distance, so basically in between your DPS and your tanks, so that you could be supportive towards your tanks and also peel for your DPSs, because of his shield burst, which doesn't last very long. So I don't think that you should necessarily be relying heavily on your shield burst. It only lasts a second and a half. It does drain pretty quickly, but it does give you that half a second to build up your thrusters again, so that you can quickly get away. And also maybe it might give your DPS enough time to either get the kill or to get their movement ability up so that they can escape. So mid-range DPS/support character, and pre-hive, you should be just focusing on grinding animals. Send someone else to do harvesters. You should just be farming animals because you do it very, very quickly and very, very efficiently and very, very safely because you can easily kite the animals. Let's talk about, obviously we've kind of dove into his strengths in that situation. He is a lot of DPS, especially uncontested with his plants. Skill tree. So the skill tree that I have chosen to go down is basically prioritizing his plants. I want to make as much value as possible from his plants as I can. So I've tried all of these essence upgrades, and I feel like it goes from early bloomers is very, very, very strong because seed pods do not have to be watered in order to be activated. You fire your seed pods a lot further than you do your water pistol. I think it's 50 meters for your seed pod and it's like 40 meters for your water pistol. So you can shoot them a lot further, so you don't need to water them. You don't need to put yourself in an exposed position to get that water down. So you can just throw them around and then just forget about them and move on and wait 4 seconds and shoot another one, etc, etc. Whereas when I tried the onboard diagnostics, your med kit now regenerates every 30 seconds. It also creates a healing area for you, your plants, and allies. What it doesn't tell you there is it locks the amount of health kits that you can actually hold now. So when I saw this, I was thinking, oh my god, that's actually pretty strong. Like, you can hold 3 to 4 medkits, and they regenerate every 30 seconds, so I'll always have max amount of medkits, or I should at least, in between fights. Which is not the case. It limits you to 1, and in some situations, you need to have another medkit during fights. Especially if the enemy team is gunning for you specifically, or you get ambushed. So, I don't think the onboard diagnostics is worth taking, especially with the benefits that you get. So, when I was playing with a Drakal, and I used my med kit, and he was standing right next to me. He was, I think it was about 10-20 HP. I used it next to me. I only healed him to 120 HP, and it took forever to heal him. It took like about 7 seconds to heal that amount, and I don't think that it's, I don't know whether it was maybe a bug that I was having or something along those lines, but I don't think the onboard diagnostics is something you should be heavily invested in and heavily building Bugg around, because I don't think it's worth it. His spray damage is increased by 25% as a dot. I think this is strong, but I don't think is as strong as early bloomers. Yes, you're going to get more damage up from your blaster, but I think your primary damage source is coming from your plants, especially when you basically make it what, a 7 versus sorry, not a 7, a 6 versus however many, because you're basically adding in another person that is distracting the enemy team, and they have to deal with it, or they have to move away from it. So there's a lot of very good area denial, or a lot of time wasting they have to deal with, especially if you take the shield on the plants as well, which makes them 200 HP. And then obviously realign gyros, there's nothing you can really do about that. The movement speed increase is noticeable. It's very good, especially when you have to deal with things like Drakal constantly on you, and obviously moving around the map when you're not using your thrusters, which is not that often. Level 3, so you have Tendon Protect, Shield Burst increase from 50%. I don't think this is worth taking. The reason why is because the shield lasts the same amount of time as before. 1.5 seconds, and the likelihood of you taking 600 damage in 1.5 seconds is pretty slim. And if you're ever in a situation where you are, you're most likely dead anyways. So I don't think that this is worth prioritizing, especially when the fact that you don't really lose 400. The base is 400. You don't necessarily lose 400 HP in 1.5 seconds in this game. So I don't think that this is something you should prioritize over, because the longevity of the shield doesn't change, only the amount. Seed pods are spawned with a overshield, which is, it adds an extra 50 HP to your shields, to your plants. So that is huge. Over time, you think about it, you must place, I don't know, let's just say for example in a game, you throw like 100 plants down. That is a lot of HP that they have to chew through. And blooming blossoms, plants that can be watered until they're overcharged, stunning nearby enemies. The stun is 1.5 seconds, I think, from when I was testing it, and it does 20 damage on stun. Again, that's a guess. It's hard to judge the amount of damage that you do, because there's no custom games and there's no real like bar graph to show exactly how much damage you've done. So I don't think the blooming blossoms is something you should prioritize. Again, keeping your plants up, keeping them doing more damage, is more important than looking for a stun putting yourself in the position where you have to be closer to the enemy and focusing on your plants and not focusing on everything else around you, so that you can get the water down to get it's such a positional thing, because the enemy has to be standing within, I think it's about 5 or 6 meters of the plants for that AoE to actually trigger. So it's not worth building around. I think this is the weakest one of the three, and I don't recommend Blooming Blossoms. And I also don't recommend taking Tend and Protect because of the duration. Level 4, no pesticide. Like, this one is very, very strong for PvE and also PvP. Obviously, if someone jumps into you, it applies vulnerability, which is an extra 20% damage increase to that target from any source. So if you tag someone with your gas and everyone focuses it, they will take 20% extra damage. It is absolutely crazy. The amount of tanks that I've just melted with this, with a sniper, a Joa, sorry, with me, it is crazy. Level 5, high grade biofuel, grants an initial burst when using the thrusters, or daisy chain. Now, this is kind of dependent on who you're playing against, because I feel like the base movement speed that it gives you could be good if you're being hard focused, or if they're just gunning for you all the time and you just need that little bit more of evasiveness. I don't think that you should be prioritizing this. I think you should be positioning a little bit better if you're getting caught all the time. So I feel like Daisy Chain is just overall better. It's better for far. You just completely destroy swarms late game, and you can easily like clear out 2 swarms before the next hive's up, even when moving across the map. And also in fights, Daisy Chain is super strong. Like, I think one game I did like 15k damage with Bugg just from me testing. Like, it's crazy. Obviously, I don't know how much damage came from my plants, but I can guarantee you that probably 75% of that damage came from my plants. Which is crazy when you think about it. Like, when everyone says that this guy is support, I don't think that his main category is support. I think his main category is DPS and support secondary. So hopefully that rundown gives you a little bit of an understanding of Bugg and how to play him in a team environment. I don't think you should necessarily be playing Bugg as a solo, because he relies heavily on like pressure, and at the moment, from my experience, solo queuing is very hard when playing things like Bugg, because your tanks don't understand how to create pressure. Not everyone is grouping up because there's no voice chat. So I don't think the Bugg is necessarily something you should be playing as a solo player, because you're going to die a lot, and it's all about positioning and being smart with him, which doesn't really realign with no voice chat and people not understanding in the game currently. So that is my guide on Bugg. Hopefully it's helpful in some way. This is my first video, so I'd appreciate some feedback on like either quality wise or things that I say. Maybe you want some more examples of certain things, or a video example of certain things going forward. So yep, hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.